Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back here today with one of my favorite topics, which is baseball. And this was a thing that came out in the last few days. You can see it published May 31st, so this came out, I think, the day beforehand or maybe the day before that. But it is about a change to the baseball records now. It says the Negro Leagues entering MLB records is a nice gesture, but it's more fantasy league than practical. And when I heard about this at first, I just thought about the website Baseball Reference, which I go to basically daily because a random baseball thing will hit my brain. I'll go, oh, gotta go check it out. And I highly recommend going to that site. If you have any baseball questions about like statistically speaking, any sort of baseball questions, that's the website for you. But so my first thoughts about this really weren't much of anything. It was just kind of like, okay, the records are going to be incorporated into baseball stuff. And I was like, okay, like, I kind of thought they were because they are on Baseball Reference. Like you can go look up. This is actually a picture of Josh, or a statue of a picture of, or a picture of a statue. There we go, of Josh Gibson, who was a Negro Leagues player, and actually his name is right here. And like, okay, his stats are on the website, so it's like, okay, fine. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, but they were never a major league. So does this make sense? So let's go ahead and see what the author here has to say. It says Josh Gibson should have been the first black player to go from the Negro Leagues to Major League Baseball ahead of Jackie Robinson on April 15th, 1947 with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Gibson was a better and much more powerful, legendary Ruthian player, of course, referring to Babe Ruth. But he died on January 20th, 1947, at age 35 of a stroke from a brain tumor. Gibson, Robinson, did they already name these players? They didn't. Gibson, Robinson, okay, Satchel Paige. I got confused there. I'm sorry. There's Gibson, Robinson, Satchel Paige, Larry Doby, who was the second black player in MLB after Robinson and the first American League black player. So many other black players should have spent their entire professional careers playing for MLB or in their organizations on the way up. All right. Yes, says this is a wrong that cannot be fixed. Correct. Can't go back in time and change that. Because once black players began playing in the majors, many of them were great, such as Robinson, Page, Doby, Minnie Minoso, Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, Monte Irvin, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, and many others. Mr. Cub, right there is my man. That virtually all of them proved they belonged or more than belonged. So they should have been there all along. The same sort of stupidity kept the number of starting black quarterbacks down in the NFL until only recent years and decades. But to put a huge portion of statistics from the Negro Leagues, which is from the 1920s to the 1950s, into the MLB record book now is a mistake. MLB did this on Tuesday, so what was that date? 31st was Friday, 30th, 20th. This was the 28th that happened. Okay, so the new MLB record book and database will go public on June 20th when the St. Louis Cardinals play the San Francisco Giants in a Negro Leagues tribute game at historic Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. So that says Negro League stats to MLB doesn't add up, and I don't really need to say what my position is on this because I've read this article and I know it explains why, and we'll get to that. It says, so it's a wonderful idea, but it doesn't add up statistically. It says, while writing my latest book, I generally steered clear of stories about the old Negro Leagues, noted baseball author Rob Nair, known for his seam-head statistics and sabermetrics, wrote for ESPN in 2008. And I do have a bunch of books by Rob Nair, and I'd recommend all of them. He's one of those guys that I make a point of, like, looking for a book from, but I don't think he's written anything anytime recently. I did look probably in the last couple of years. I haven't seen anything from him in a while. Could be totally wrong about that, and this reminds me maybe I should go look into that. But again, highly recommended. So he continues his quote by saying, not because I don't love all those old stories, rather it was partly because I didn't know where to start. There are so many wonderful stories about the Negro Leagues, and partly because the research was terribly daunting. We don't have complete Negro League schedules or statistics or box scores, at least not where they're accessible. And they're still not 16 years later. Sorry, in case of the hiccups really quick. There's no telling what happened in those leagues and other non-Negro leagues not included in MLB records. So this move by MLB is a very nice gesture and an admirable effort to make up for past incredibly racist wrongs that go beyond numbers, but it falls far short statistically and is not reality. Yeah, I kind of says it's a nice gesture. It's another way of saying it's a virtue signal, is what it is, and I have to agree with that, but you should still explain why. It says, this was done by MLB after a 3-year research project into statistics retrieval headed up by MLB official historian John Thorne of Ken Burns' 1994 baseball documentary fame, which I do own on Blu-ray, and it's a very, very good documentary. I highly recommend that to everybody as well, even if Ken Burns has a case of TDS. As the Negro Leagues had great players who could have dominated MLB over that span, particularly Gibson. He is known as the only man to hit a home run out of Yankee Stadium, which I'm surprised at that Babe Ruth never did, or Lou Gehrig, and just the exceptional number of power hitters that they've had, or like all-time great power hitters that they've had there, that it's only Josh Gibson that did it. So it reportedly traveled 580 to 600 feet in a 1930 playoff series between his Homestead Grays and the New York Lincoln Giants when he was only 18. As Gibson has been in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown since 1972, as is Robinson since 1962, along with Page, Doby, Minosa, Campanella, Irvin, Mays, Banks, basically all the guys he mentioned before, and countless other Negro League stars, as they should be. That's correct. This keyword, Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. It's not the MLB Hall of Fame. Good point. I think that's worth mentioning. So it says Negro Leagues has erratic statistical records, and this is kind of where my argument was coming into, like why I don't think this is the best thing. And this is really the only argument that I had. So this is a key distinction because the statistics in the Negro Leagues and in some of the past major leagues, such as the National Association of 1871 to 75, were very frequently unbalanced, to say the least. In 1969, a special MLB committee on records decided to incorporate the statistics from such former major leagues as the American Association, which lasted from 1882 to 91, the Union Association from 1884, the Players League from 1890, and the Federal League from 1914 to 15 into MLB stats, but the National Association was excluded for erratic scheduling and procedures. And this kind of explains what I was thinking a little bit there, but it's kind of more just, it's not a major league, and it wasn't Major League Baseball. I mean, I kind of felt like, and I explained this to another baseball friend of mine, that it'd be like taking, if you're an NFL fan, like Arena League stats and putting them and saying, now these are NFL stats. So like all of a sudden you have like, oh, your single record for touchdowns is like 104, because there are a lot more touchdowns in the Arena League than there were in the NFL. It's like, that doesn't make sense though. Like it wasn't the NFL. So let's keep going here. It says, yet it is now incorporating some of the statistics of the Negro Leagues, which had a history of erratic scheduling and procedures as well. As the Negro Leagues had a significantly shorter season than MLB, for example, and players would also play in independent leagues and barnstorming travel leagues. So yeah, that's what they mean by inconsistent, is that the level of play wasn't the same. Like, you know, you're playing the major leagues, you're only facing other major league teams. The Negro Leagues, you bounced around, or not the teams necessarily, but the players would bounce around to different leagues. And barnstorming, go look that up if you don't know what it is, but it was just traveling, you know, just going around and basically doing, like, I think if I remember correctly, it's like basically doing like pickup games sort of things against other like professional teams in the area. So, I mean, it's almost like a Major League Baseball team just kind of going like, hey, if there's a team of people over there that want to go play, let's just go play them, and then counting those stats as Major League stats. So, again, it doesn't really make sense. That's actually not a statue of Josh Gibson. That is the man himself. Says even Gibson's Hall of Fame bronze plaque in Cooperstown, for example, questions his statistic. Says Joshua Gibson, Negro Leagues from 1930 to 46, considered greatest slugger in Negro Leagues, power-hitting catcher who hit almost 800 home runs in league and independent baseball during his 17-year career. It says almost 800 home runs. What does that mean? On Wednesday, national radio show host Dan Patrick asked Thorne how many home runs Gibson actually hit. So Thorne laughed and said, officially, I believe the number is 174 in league play, but independent ball on his plaque is barnstorming ball, and you never know what the quality of the opposition was, whether it was semi-pro or amateur. As I was saying, you don't really know who you're facing. It could just be some regular people. Yet Gibson is now atop the MLB record-booking career batting average at 372 above Ty Cobb's 367 that has been number one in the book since 1928. So keep in mind that now the person who is in batting average of all time, or the league all-time leader in career batting average, is someone that hasn't actually like retired recently, and he just happens to be at the top. It's just we're incorporating stats from a player that never played in the major leagues, is now the all-time Major League Baseball career batting average leader. So that doesn't really make sense to me, but hey, maybe I'm not seeing something. So as Gibson, who was called the Black Babe Ruth, is also the new number one in career slugging percentage at 718, ahead of Babe Ruth's 690 from 1914 to 1935. And he is number one in OPS, which is on-base average plus slugging percentage, at 1.177 over Ruth's 1.164. And this is absurd, and Thorne, the very man known as the official historian of Major League Baseball, is telling you that. There's a picture of Barry Bonds. It says the new additions to the MLB stats are fun to look at. For example, Gibson's .974 slugging percentage in 1937 for the Grays is now the record, and other Negro Leagues players pushed Barry Bonds' .863 in 2001 for the San Francisco Giants to fifth behind Gibson, Mule Suttle's .877 in 1926 for the St. Louis Stars, Gibson's .871 in 1943 for the Grays, and Charlie Chino Smith's .870 in 1929 for the New York Lincoln Giants. His Bonds' OPS record of 1.421 in 2004 is now dropped to third, behind Gibson's 1.474 in that same 1937 season and his 1.435 in the 1943 season. And the author says, I can't say I miss Bonds, the modern-day Ty Cobb of human relations. Nice. This is being pushed back, but Gibson's Grays played only 63 games in 1937, and just to give you an FYI, and it actually says it over here, that at the time, though, they played 154 games in the majors. So Josh Gibson was playing, what is that, not even, just trying to do some quick math, to like a third, not even a third of the number of games as the regular major league players. So then Gibson played in only 39 of those 63 games, finishing with a .417 average that goes toward his now number one career batting average. It's easier to hit for a high average when you don't play 154, 162 games in a season. Bonds played 153 games in 2001 and 147 in 2004. Everything is now so skewed and screwy. Stats are always sort of skewed and screwy anyway, like when you start comparing time periods, but this takes the cake. It's like Thorne and his cronies are a bunch of mad scientists throwing around stats like so much dinosaur DNA from Amber like the old guy that was Richard Attenborough in Jurassic Park, or they have watched Field of Dreams too many times. Says MLB researchers did exhaustive work, but says Thorne, 77, did extremely detailed, diligent, and exhaustive work with plenty of help from others as they poured through microfilm and microfiche of old newspapers, and maybe Amber, in search of box scores for accurate records to confirm anecdotal evidence, such as almost 800 home runs. A four-homer game by Gibson in 1938 was much talked about, but not confirmed, so it was thrown out. As was a home run by Mays in 1948 for the Birmingham Black Barons because box scores could not be located. So Thorne estimated that 72% of Negro Leagues games from 1920 to 1948 were located and included in the new statistics that involved 2,300 Negro Leagues players. So, well, that's great, but you can't pick and choose this statistic or that statistic from this year or that year in determining career numbers, and then just throw them into the updated MLB database. It's a fantasy. But there are 2,300 players, Thorne said, some of whom were in for a cup of coffee or an inconsequential season in a league that didn't last very long. And it's these players, these individuals whose families can now point to their name in the record and book and say, he was a major leaguer. Actually, he wasn't, for really demented and ridiculous reasons, but he wasn't. So it sounds like a new version of fantasy baseball incorporating the everybody gets a trophy mentality of today. That's a good way of putting it. It's participation trophy stuff. This is a show of respect for great players, MLB Commissioner Manfred said, but it's not a show of respect for Major League Baseball players because now they've lost records that someone else who didn't even play in the league is holding. See the point? So I'm a major fan of Gibson and Page, as I am too, always have been, and they're in Cooperstown as well as they should be, but this doesn't add up. So many Negro Leagues players should have spent their entire careers in the actual game of Major League Baseball. Putting them in the record books now does not erase those mistakes and is flawed. Baseball research is great, but that's just it. It's only research, and Thorne is manipulating research to fulfill some fantasy. It is the research effort that we memorialize, whereby we set some policies for leaderboards that have upturned the baseball world, he said. Sounds like Thorne has an agenda going beyond numbers, and Ty Cobb is really pissed about all this, even more than he was about almost everything when he was alive, right? Yeah, like I said, I don't mind the statistics being there for people to look at. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but to suddenly say that these statistics are now going to be put in and we're going to use those as like, oh wait, like it said, now Josh Gibson is the all-time leader in batting average. It's like he never played in the majors though, so why would that statistic be more? I mean, it's like at this point, why don't we take like the Japan league, like all their leagues, or the Korean leagues, and put their statistics in here? I mean, they're not Major League Baseball, but they're professional baseball players. You know, why not do that? Why don't we start putting in college stats? You know, I mean, it just, again, there's no end to this. I think it's kind of opened up a bit of a Pandora's box. I don't think any of that other stuff is going to happen, you know, but at the same time, it just seems like it's a virtue signal that opened up a Pandora's box, and I just don't see where this goes, really. I mean, the only thing is just that I guess everyone's just gonna have to accept it, and it is what it is. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and like scream and rant and rave about it. I just don't agree with the decision. But whatever. I'm not really sure what else to think about it. So let me know what you think about this. Do you agree with this decision or not? If you don't, let me know why. If you do, let me know why you think it's okay. So leave a comment below, like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.